Government school teachers are often blamed for the poor state of public education in India. Some claim that they are incompetent, absent from classrooms, and overpaid, particularly when compared to teachers in the private sector. Is this true? I'm Abhishek, and this week on Research Radio, we'll speak to Pratibha Kundu about the state of India's public education system by focusing on teachers. Dr. Kundu is with the Center for Budget and Governance Accountability, where she leads research on the financing of education. We'll discuss her EPW article, where she analyzes data from 6 states to understand if teachers indeed are the ones who are letting our system down. In the second half of the podcast, we'll also discuss the landmark National Education Policy that was published last year, and we'll focus on its impact on teachers. Thank you so much for joining us on the show, Pratibha.
Thanks, Abhishek.
So, you've mentioned that there's constant criticism of teachers' performance on the ground. You know that despite high salaries, the performance of children in examinations has not improved substantially. The primary reason cited for this is that majority of teachers are not competent enough to teach effectively. Where does this criticism stem from, and what does it say about public education more broadly?
Undoubtedly, the role of teachers in quality improvement is paramount, so there is no question about it. But the problem is this narrative of measuring teachers' efficiency through cost effectiveness or linking that with students' achievement. This is relatively new concept. And from where it is emerging? Because teachers are viewed as one of the inputs of school education system. And the output is examination result, or the final outcome is learning achievement. And the system is looking for that. And I feel this approach towards teaching, it started changing after the scheme Sarva Shiksha Abhijan. It was a centrally sponsored scheme launched in 2002 that was introduced. The thing is, the approach of SSA was quite short term. What happened for quick results, SSA went for some policy measures like appointment of contractual teachers. Then there was policy like reducing the duration of in-service teacher training program. So earlier 2 to 3 months was given for teacher training program, but under SSC it was only 10 days. And naturally, all these factors have direct implication on the quality. And then I also want to mention that after the 6th Central Pay Commission, it's in 2006 it came, many of the states have also increased the salary of regular cadre teachers. And for some states, it's quite a jump. And since teacher salary constitutes the largest share of education budget, so this high salary is now getting considered as fiscal burden. And then system started linking this cost effectiveness and efficiency of teachers, and it started questioning the accountability of teachers. Though I must say it's not very clear to me that controlling the teachers' salaries, how one can guarantee the accountability of teachers or how one can ensure the improvement in learning.
Mm-hmm. It seems that the shift towards relying on the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, SSA, was quite important and cut down teacher training from for a few months to about 10 to 20 days, which is quite a big cut. Why did states come to rely so heavily on the scheme?
There is a difference between a scheme and a holistic approach, sectoral approach. Since it's a scheme, it has a very limited agenda. There should be some spending annually. There is some sanctions. So allocation you have to spend in a 1 year time, and you have to show some quick results. So it's some sort of expenditure cutting was there. And also you probably know that in India, the teacher education system, the institutions which are responsible for providing teachers education like DIETS, District Institute for Teachers Education, most of the teachers education system in India are private. 90% are private. Only 10% institutions are there which are government run, and the situation of those institutions are horrible. So instead of promoting for teacher education, which is mainly pre-service education, the focus on some sort of recurring expenditure towards in-service teacher training. And that's why this 10 days period and also very low unit cost was associated with this in-service teacher training. It's like 300 rupees per day, and for some states 200 rupees per day. So you can imagine.
Yes. And conversations and debates on teachers' roles in government schools usually points to absenteeism rates. Can you tell us more about your findings on this topic?
Actually, there is a subtle difference between teacher absence and teacher absenteeism. Now, the problem is when we talk about role of teachers in this context, we tend to use it interchangeably. Let me explain. So, teacher absenteeism, it points towards the absence of teachers in school without appropriate reason. Whereas teachers can be absent from school for many reasons. It can be official work, administrative work, or any other circumstantial reasons. So basically, you see that teacher absenteeism is a subset of teacher absence. Let me put a data before you, then it would be much more easier to understand. A study by Azim Premji Foundation, they did a survey. In a regular day, the survey finds that when teacher absence was at around 19%, teacher absenteeism was only 2.5%. That means what was the survey looks finds that the other teachers were either absent on account of official duties or because of the authorized leave. So this is the picture. Now the question is, why interpreting it wrongly is problematic. So what happens most of the time, this teacher absenteeism is discussed from the lens of fiscal burden. It considers if teachers are absent, then it's a wastage of public money. Probably this is a view which is promoting the idea of performance linked salary. So I'm not saying it's bad to have an outcome orientation in the approach, but the problem is we haven't created any such environment for teachers that we can link their salary with outcome. Because teachers' salaries do not directly determine their performance. There are so many other factors like their working conditions, teacher education, recruitment type, remuneration, and so many factors which influence the learning outcomes. Also, there is a recent trend that this overestimated figure, state governments are taking some policy measures. You can see that teachers are getting monitored through biometrics, through CCTV, etc., and which is really demotivating. So my whole point is, without understanding the fundamental problems behind teachers' absence, it is not wise drawing up policies for them.
Right, right. And could you walk me through how the situation for teacher vacancies and trainings becomes more pronounced and serious with the secondary schools?
You may see that many teachers are teaching all subjects. So someone who is teaching physics also teaching mathematics, English, many things we find in schools. Now, under Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhijan, one of the schemes which was catering secondary education, so there was norm that every school should have 5 subject-specific teachers and 1 head teacher. But you will understand the extent of shortage. Let me give you some statistics that will tell you. So in Bihar, there is only 1 English teacher which is teaching 1,995 children. Similarly, the pupil-teacher ratio in West Bengal, for mathematics, 1 teacher is teaching 858 students. So you can see how deep-rooted is the problem. And even for the head teacher post, that in Bihar and Chhattisgarh, more than 70% of these head teacher posts are lying vacant. And so there is huge shortage at secondary level.
And why is it that state and central governments are not recruiting enough teachers?
So no recruitment or you say low recruitment, it's a long time event now. There is increase in enrollment in elementary level, and so there was demand created at secondary schools. The school has expanded, the enrollment has increased, and naturally demand for teachers have also increased. But the problem is, in the past or even now, there is no policy or financial priorities for secondary education. It's still in favor of elementary education. For the last 10 years, if you take the data, government spending on secondary education is stagnant at 1% of GDP. But despite the need of teachers, government is not recruiting simply because it will cause fiscal burden on states. So whenever you are recruiting 1 regular cadet teacher, so government needs to pay them salary in scale. They have to pay travel allowance, dearness allowance, pensions, etc., which is definitely cost intensive. Thus, what is happening is that states are managing with appointing contractual teachers, and that option is very open to them because not much money they have to pay, and there are so many people who are without jobs and with lower salary people are accepting. But still, there is also problem because Bihar government in its report mentioned that since requirement of secondary education needs higher qualification, and since government is giving lower salary, the government is unable to attract qualified teachers, and that is the problem is more in case of science and mathematics teachers.
Right, right. And a recurring argument in the article and based on our conversation is that the government is underfunding education, and this is hindering the prospects of India's largely young population. These problems, however, are not new, and you've mentioned how they date as far back as 1966, when the Education Commission raised concerns about teacher training in India. This is a large question to answer, but why is it that education is not prioritized?
You see, government priority for any sector, I mean, including education, it gets reflected in the budget. And to me, budget is more of a political statement than a financial statement. So when it comes to question of policy and policies relating to outcome, policymakers always prefer for short-term outcomes than a long-term one. Thus, you will see it's not the whole education sector is getting priority, but some of the components are getting priority. There is substantial investment you will find in school infrastructure. Time to time, there is investment in providing non-monetary incentives to students, for example, in the form of bicycles and laptops, etc. Sometimes you can also see recruitment of teachers, especially before election. However, the finer components of school education, like teachers' training, like monitoring or addressing the issue of equity, these are some of the issues that always remains neglected.
Right, right. And just to follow up, are there examples where state governments have prioritized teachers and their training?
Yes, from my study states, whatever I have seen, this is true for Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu. So, in case of teacher recruitment or teacher training, both the states have actually followed the policy of appointing professionally qualified and regular cadre teachers. So, it's always the case for Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra, and similar feature you can also see in Kerala also, and we can see the impact of that in the outcome, because these are some of the states which are in the higher side of the education ladder.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. And what are some specific reasons, maybe structural, that states find it difficult to fund teacher education?
By nature of constitution, actually, states fiscal health are not that good. They don't have that much power of revenue generation. So when their whole resource envelope is limited, in that limited resource envelope, generally it happens that states are prioritizing the sectors like urban development, housing, judiciary, etc., and social sectors get neglected. But it's also the approach of the political parties, their objectives, their mottos, which sometimes push for spending on social sectors. And probably that has happened in Kerala, for say, example.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. And based on the data, I also observed that there's a drop in the number of schools, students, and teachers between 2014 and 2050 and the year after. Has this trend continued? Are more students now preferring to go to private schools?
Yeah, it's true. There is a general trend for the last few years that enrollment in government school is decreasing and private school is increased. I think currently 34% of the school going children are in private school. However, if we look at the last 3 years DICE data, the MHRD data, you can say, interestingly, you will see that there is a decrease in enrollment both in government school, government aided school, as well as recognized private schools. And where the increase is showing, it's in the other category school. And which are these other category schools? These are basically madrasas and unrecognized private schools. So my hunch is that children are now taking admission in this unrecognized low-cost so-called English medium private schools. But I want to say that there is some good news also. Like this year, after 25 years, enrollment in government school in Kerala has increased as compared to private schools. Again, number of government school in Delhi has increased. A similar picture was also observed in case of teacher recruitment in government schools. Some of the states like Chhattisgarh, Karnataka, Delhi, Rajasthan, they have actually recruited a number of teachers in government school. And here mentionable is that 38,000 teachers getting recruited between 1718 and 1819 in Rajasthan and 20,000 in Karnataka. But just a fact to mention here that there was assembly elections in both the states in 2018 also. So
Right. That's probably played a role.
Yeah.
And you've written that, instead of recruiting regular teachers, states are now in the process of deploying teachers to show a reduction in the number of single teacher schools, and that the overall parent teacher ratio is as per the norms under the Right to Education Act. Why do governments aim to meet selected norms rather than prioritize the quality of education as a whole? And are there ways that these indicators that are important, can they be made more nuanced and holistic?
Yeah, this is the fact that the states are trying to meet the PTR norm as per the RTE Act. It's not about meeting selected norms against the prioritizing quality, because I feel that quality is not solely a so-called qualitative concept. To measure quality, you have to have some quantitative measures, and pupil-teacher ratio is one of them. So when we look at into the question of meeting the norm of PTR, I feel it is not bad at all, because rather it's a requirement. However, the question is, what is the process government is following to meet the target, and also at which level the norm is getting realized. You have seen that the states have been able to meet the target of PTR, because it's easy to meet the average PTR at state level, but if you want to see the data at district level or at block level or at school level, then only the true pictures will come out, because there is, I think, more than 1 lakh schools are single teacher schools. It's also the from which perspective you are looking at the data or you are presenting the data.
Right. And I know that your research hasn't covered this specifically, but if we could delve a little on the impact that COVID might have had on teacher training and their performance.
Firstly, teachers are facing huge problem because they were not at all very much familiar with this online education, and suddenly something has come to them. And also the way the government is promoting for privatization as well as digital education, you may see that in near future there is no chance of recruitment of teachers, because the whole online education will serve the purpose, as well as you will see that teacher trainings day by day, instead of depending on the proper teacher education program, government is asking to rely on the some of the online websites they have under Prova, and this kind of portals are there where they are giving online classes to teachers for in-service teachers training. So it's difficult to serve the purpose of teacher training if you get education through online. So I think COVID has made the situation worsen. We can see in near future a number of children is going to leave schools. There's a high chance a dropout will increase, and also this digitization, it's problematic because we don't have enough infrastructure. We are not yet ready, and even if it is ready, I mean, it cannot be a substitute of traditional one-to-one class.
Yes. And I'm curious about some of the unanswered questions on teacher education that you'd like to investigate for your future work.
Actually, as a continuation of that, since we have see the pictures at union level, but and also at the state level, but what is actually happening at the district levels, it's really very unknown to us, because there is no such information at neither in public domain, and it's not easily available. And we have seen that the government is talking about decentralization in approach, but the whole problem lies at the school level. The money is not reaching to school. The planning is not happen at school level, though the guidelines are saying that it's a bottom-up approach instead of top-down approach. But what is happening that schools have no clue. They are not making any plans. It's like states are making the plans and feeding them to the districts and schools. So that's why we are planning to look more deep dive, looking in the budget questions at what is happening at state, district levels as well as school levels.
Yes, there's serious inequality in accessing digital education that has been consistently downplayed by the government. So the National Education Plan, the NEP, was published after Prativa and I recorded this podcast on the role of government teachers. So I reached out to Prativa again since this NEP was so monumental, and she was kind enough to give me another chance to speak to her about the NEP. So here we go. I would like to start by understanding about the requirements to qualify as a teacher. So I understand that there are several changes, and one among them is that there's a need for a 4-year Bachelor of Education by the year 2030. I was curious about how that might impact the quality of teaching.
The best thing is that new policy actually has acknowledged the role of teachers, and it's talking about that no reform possible unless the teacher is brought center stage. That's a very good thing. And it's also saying, it's also hoping for actually outstanding students will come and choose this teaching profession, and that's why they have come up with a set of recommendations. And regarding this requirement, the first recommendations that we can see in this policy is the minimum 4 years integrated BA degree for teaching that is required. I mean, there are options for 1 and 2 year BA programs also, because those who are with a bachelor degree can do the 2 year BA program, and those who have master's degree or something like this equivalent to this 4 year multidisciplinary degree, they can also take 1 year the B.Ed course. But generally, for most of the students, it's 4 year integrated B.Ed courses. Now, this is followed in America and also in many other countries. It's a very much global practice, this 4 year things. And so, keeping the parity, it's also good for India too. This measure is, I'll say, it's a very good measure.
Right, right. So that is good to hear.
Some of the things that we need to keep in mind that before rolling out this program, because whenever we are talking about these particular recommendations, there are two other recommendations we should also mention that is there in the policy document. That is, one is they're talking about a new and comprehensive national curriculum framework for teacher education, and the other one they're talking about is a common guiding set of national professional standard for teachers. So what does these two recommendation means? This means somehow NEP 2020 is proposing a very single model of teacher education, a homogenized, a standardized system of preparing teachers, which I feel is disregarding the specific needs and concerns of diverse states and different levels of education that students are joining for these courses. So something, this is one of the concern that I feel. Now, coming to the nitty gritty of this program, if it rolls out, then the first question comes: who are going to offer this course? Who will offer these courses? So, we have seen that National Council of Teacher Education, which is the nodal body, it has invited applications from all the interested institutions to include these 4 years B.Ed courses in their curriculum, and that is they're suggesting that they should start from 2021. Now, in this connection, I think we need to remember the experience of the similar kind of thing that has started 6 years back in the Delhi University, that this 4 years undergraduate program, because this B.Ed program is also in the same line. Generally, we have this B.Ed program will give a dual degree. One is the graduation degree, at the same time the B.Ed degree, because there will be combination like BA, B.Ed, become B.Ed, or BSc B.Ed. This kind of thing is going to happen. So earlier, this graduation program was for 3 years. So that means this, for this 4 years program, it's not only an extra year but also additional teaching hours, right? But other than that, it's more about a changed pedagogy, because since we were talking about one integrated course, so it requires restructuring from the very first year to fourth year. You can't design it separately. Also, the policy is stating that schools will need teachers who can teach in multiple languages and also have knowledge of new age courses like coding, like computational thinking, etc. So the B.Ed course will be accordingly in that fashion will be designed. Now think of that, who are then going to teach this? The teachers who are going to offer this training, they also then need to have this multiple language knowledge. They should have this knowledge of new age courses. Then the first questions come: are we then going to appoint new teachers for this 4 years this undergraduate integrated B.Ed program? Because policy is not talking about, or UGC, even UGC is not talking about recruitment of new teachers for undergraduate program in a very immediate point, and that is a serious problem for longer period of time, because regular cadre teacher recruitment is not happening.
Right, right. And could we also discuss the teacher eligibility tests, the TETs?
Now, again, this is not something new, because if you see the Right to Education Act, there is one of the norms that teachers need to qualify either central teacher eligibility test or state TET. But that was still class 8, because RT was for elementary education. Now, the what is going to change now? The earlier the TET was divided into two components: part one till class 5 and part two till 6, 7, 8. Now, since the whole new education policy, the national education policy, is changing the school structure, now we have four parts like foundational, preparatory, middle, and secondary. So, accordingly, the eligibility test, teacher eligibility test, will be also developed accordingly. That has been proposed in the policy document. And for the subject teachers, there will be some national testing agency whose score will matter in the whole recruitment process. The one of the important things, I think that's also a good measure, that it's talking about that no even the private school teachers also need to qualify the TET. It was earlier also there in the RT, but again only for class 8, but now it's applicable till class 12. So basically, what does it mean? A candidate who has a 4-year BEd degree and TET certificate is eligible to apply for teacher recruitment in school. So if we think in terms of ensuring quality, obviously these benchmarks are really good, and these are good measures. But problem is again also in terms of TET, we have seen only I think around 50% qualifies this TET, teacher eligibility test, till date. So 15%. So the percentage, pass percentage, is so low. So if again this case happens, then what would be, how we are going to fill the all these existing vacancies? So all these things we need to keep in mind before rolling out this program, before we have to prepare the bed for it.
Yeah, yeah. And it seems like you're identifying the ways that some of the groundwork hasn't been laid to establish the kinds of requirements that have been proposed with the NEP 2020.
To some extent that is true also, and the other thing I also feel that the policy hasn't taken much lesson from the existing situation in many of the cases. So that's why I give you the example of Delhi University. You know, the Delhi University, for what we are saying so many things, the undergraduate program, the 4 years, the 1,500 students had taken this undergraduate program, and when the companies have came for this campus selection, only three they find eligible for this, because the kind of semester, the kinds of weightage subject, the way the teaching was happening, because they were trying to make you expert in all the subjects with a little bit of knowledge. So they find only three students basically enough knowledge about to pursue the particular job they were offering.
Mm-hmm. And how might the recruitment process itself impact the quality of teachers that are hired? Is including interviews in the recruitment process a good idea?
Again, it's a good measure, because it has mentioned that interview will become an integral part of teacher hiring. I think beside examination, if there is one sort of one-to-one discussion, one-to-one, I mean, there is interview, it's always good for as a good measure. But it's also saying that interview is it will assess the comfort and proficiency in teaching the local language. So that's also one of the purposes of this interview. Now, and the other point also regarding recruitment that policy has mentioned, that is, I also feel a very good step, that it's saying that hiring and vacancies in schools will be managed digitally, and all the states, depending on the required subject-wise teacher vacancies, they will load the data in the website, and accordingly the priority and situation. So there is more transparency in that sense. But again, there are some loose ends in terms of recruitment. The first thing I want to mention, so in the foundational literacy and numeracy chapter, so there one of the points the policy made that teacher vacancies will be filled at the earliest in a time bound manner in the places where larger pupil teacher ratio or disadvantaged areas. These are all fine. Then it says that special attention will be given to employing local teachers. Those are familiar with the local languages. But question is, who are these local teachers? How there is nothing clear explicitly said about the policy about what will be their working condition, what will be the salaries of local teachers. Are they come through this 4-year integrated BEd program and then take pass, because these are they are basically a similar kind of contractual teacher. What would be their training process? All these things are very much missing, because they are just talking about there will be employment of local teachers with familiarity with local languages. So this is one of the loose end. And another thing also, in terms of, as I mentioned, the contract teachers or para teachers, or discontinuing the practice of hiring these teachers, there is nothing, no clear statement regarding this. So is it going to be the same set of people who are currently working will be retained, or what is going to change? We don't know. Another point, one more contradiction that I find in the policy, probably you have also observed that there is relaxation in terms of norms of schooling, because the policy is saying encouraging alternative models of schooling like Patshala, Gurukul, Madrasa, homeschooling, etc., etc., many sorts of schooling. Now, as I already mentioned, there is strict norms and standards for teacher education, that is 4-year B.Ed program and then TET eligible. So, how these two will go? I mean, how what this educated teacher will then what they will do in this Patsala, Gurukul, Madrasa kind of structure. So, there is a somehow a contradiction between the type of schools they are offering and type of teacher education the system is offering.
Yes, yes. And we've covered this in our previous conversation, but the NEP states that stringent action will be taken against substandard standalone teacher education institutions. What steps does the NEP recommend to ensure that teachers are well trained?
So this is a very, I mean, it's a long pending measure. You know that more than 80 to 90% of the teacher education institutions in India are private. And the Justice Burma Committee report, one of the committees was constituted for teacher education, which has clearly said that our teacher education sector is broken, and that's why so many children are at risk, and because of this existence of so many private institutions. So this is a very good measure that stringent action should be taken. But then you need to offer something. There should be setting up of teacher training institutions, government teacher training institutions, or recognized private teacher training institutions. Then you need to have a recruitment of trainers. I mean, the trainers in the institutions who can teach. Because the target of 4 years under integrated B.Ed program is 2030. So in the meantime, in this coming 10 years, these are the institutes which will work. So the diet, the district institute for teacher education, the norm is that in every district there should be one diet. So we have more than 700 districts now. I think how many, I don't know, more 740 or something, but only 512 diets are operational. But again, operational doesn't mean in operation, in full-fledged operation happening, because there is so much shortage of teachers, because one diet should have at least 25 posts, 19 academic faculty and 6 non-academic faculty, and there is huge shortage of human resources. So that's why I mean, it's a very good measure to that government is the policy has mentioned about. But then you have to give something, you have to substitute that, and you need to invest enough for the strengthening the whole teacher education system. And what is not happened till date, historically, both union and state governments, this is the one area very much resource starved. Now adequate investment have never happened. So I mean, though you are planning for well trained teachers, but at the same time you have to give the foundation. Otherwise, if you are thinking of only, I mean, the policy has so many times has talked about encouragement for online teachers training. So online teachers training can be there. It can be a, I mean, something to complement the whole system, but cannot be a substitute of the face-to-face teacher education, going through a whole going through the teacher education institutions and so on.
Right, right. And as just as we approach the end of this conversation, I wanted to learn about how the NEP views the role of the private sector in terms of providing education.
If not very explicitly, but there is all overall there is hint towards privatization. It's talking about that philanthropic activities, and philanthropy they haven't clearly spelled out that what is private philanthropic activities, and under that they are also suggesting that teacher education can come. Now, if CSR, if private, any private organization, anyone can come and take out this teacher education, can open a teacher education institution and etc. So somewhere certainly these policies going towards privatization. As I already mentioned that since there is not much resources, and given the COVID situation, given the economic situation of India, it is highly, I mean, we can easily assume that the education is not going to get priority in the coming days because there are so many other priority sector. And if there is not enough resources, then the government institution won't be able to take up. And then if you need to roll out all your policy, you will depend on privatization. That's also happening. The World Bank, the STAR project is already their government has signed a MOU with the World Bank for the STAR project, where there is teacher education is an important component. So these things are happening. So and in future, more of this we can. I mean, we are prepared to see these kind of things.
Right, right, right. And are there other changes in the NEP that you'd like to comment on that affect teacher training and availability more specifically?
One of the points I want to mention here is that the policy should talk more about resources. After all, I mean, whatever design you make on the policy, if you can't implement those vision, what's the point? And where the financial, the resource has a very important role to play. As I already mentioned, that there is very little investment for strengthening the teacher training education institutions. And there are so over time there is so much emphasis on in-service training, but pre-service education is missing in the whole structure because that needs more resources. Now even this in-service training, there is so much emphasis on the use of technology platforms like the Siam, Diksha, etc. The recently one of the press information bureau MHRD's Ministry of Education's PIB release, you have seen that the Nishtha portal, one of the portals that is full form is National Initiative for School Heads and Teachers Holistic Advancement. So this Nishtha portal is for under Samagra Shiksha Abhijan. It has been designed for the elementary stage teachers training. And the BIB release is saying that in the COVID period, since the situation is not good, they are going to train 24 lakh teachers through this portal and within a very short span of time. And the reality has there is information that only 5 days module in the Nishtha portal is there for teacher training. So at the same time, whenever we are talking about quality of teachers training, and at the same time a 5 days online portal for training, I mean, this doesn't go one with the other. And the other thing also, this is my hunch, since that there is cost implication associated with building up teacher education institution, etc. Whereas the cost of online training is obviously much, if there you have the digital infrastructure once in place, it is much lesser. So if you a chance has been given, there will always be inclination towards online training.
Mhm. And we hope to have you on Research Radio to talk about that when that does happen, and if your research focuses on that. And yeah, is there anything else you'd like to share about the NEP?
Uh, NEP is such a document. I mean, it's full of. I mean, it's contradicting itself from in every page. Like they have a lot of policy recommendations, but they don't go into any specific of those recommendations. So we don't know how to implement that. And the policy itself is saying that this is a vision plan. There will be some other committee to implement that, and those committee will take up, and then I don't know how things will happen because it's a set of contradictory recommendations without any proper support of resources. From where the money will come, we don't know. There is no such suggestion in detail that how all the specifics will be done under all these recommendations. So I am not very happy with the most of the recommendations given in the NEP.
Yes, yes. Pratibha, thank you so much for joining us on Research Radio. I think you've given us a comprehensive account of the state of public school teachers in India.
So thank you, Abhishek. Thank you for this interview.
Something that stuck with me from what Pratibha said, that a state budget is more of a political statement that tends to focus on short-term needs, essential actions such as investing in teacher training facilities and hiring regular and trained staff often end up providing benefits relatively only in the long run. There were a lot more insights that Pratibha discussed in the article that we didn't get to fully discuss, and I do recommend reading it and a special feature that we've made on it. I've shared links to both in the show notes. Next week, we'll speak to Deepa Joshi about drinking water and efforts by the state and private corporations to effectively manage this scarce resource. We'll focus on reforms related to drinking water access to investigate if they address the needs of marginalized groups. There's a lot for us to discuss since water is a topic that affects all our lives, and if the topic sounds interesting to you, do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. Take care, and I'll see you next week.